my house, I usually watch 13 because that's about it.
Okay. You also noted in your questionnaire that you've been informed, have mostly been informed of the cases of supposed self-defense, informed by just the news or just by people commenting about it, or friends or family?
Combination of all of that.
Okay.
The news has stated it, friends, family, people that come into my job and talk about it, you know.
So everybody's expressing an opinion, I guess.
Everybody has something to say about everything.
Sure. Okay. Is that true not just of this topic, but of anything?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And you stated that, but you don't have much time for the news because I'm not really clear on the particulars. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, I work 50 hours a week, and I have 2 dogs in my house that I take care of, and my parents aren't always well, so I take care of them as well. So I don't have a lot of time to pay attention, so I don't.
Okay. All right. Let's, if I could, let me prod your memory as best I can, and as best as you can recall. What do you remember about the case?
From what I remember, I know that it happened in Sanford, and I couldn't remember what month. I know it happened last year, but from what I've heard, that Mr. Zimmerman was involved in a situation with a young black male, and then, you know, the self-defense is what I've heard, but, you know, the boy ended up being killed, and that was it.
Okay. And you mentioned self-defense. I gather, is that language that was used by other people in commenting about the case?
Yeah.
Or did you automatically come to that conclusion when you evaluated? You haven't evaluated the evidence.
Not really, no. I haven't looked at much of the evidence, and personally I try and withhold my judgment on almost any case, even when it's covered in the news, because the news has always got something to spin on it. So I like to wait until I can hear things from a more neutral perspective.
So you're of the opinion that the media, either intentionally or unintentionally, sometimes has a bias to the way they...
Right. You know,
okay.
they hear things, they talk about it, and then, you know, the next day they might hear something different, and that's what they're going to talk about that day.
And you would agree that the media, besides just giving hard facts or news, they sometimes interject their opinion.
Absolutely.
In both either the newscaster or sometimes they have people comment on live. Okay.
Yep.
Have you noticed any of that, or have you watched any of those commentators talking about the case on one side or the other, or you know, sometimes they debate it?
I haven't like sat down to watch it in particular. No, I've seen pieces of it and heard from it, you know, from my parents and from other family members in different states.
Do you remember anything else about the case other than what you mentioned here? Let me prod you. Do you remember any photographs at all, if there are photographs related to the case?
I'm sure that I've seen them, but nothing like pops out in my head. No.
Anything else about court proceedings in terms of discussions or arguments or presentations to the court? Anything about those proceedings at all?
Not really, no.
Okay. Anything else about whether there were any other pieces of evidence, you know, either testimony that was presented or recordings or anything related to the case that you can recall?
Not that I know of. Again, I'm sure I've heard bits and pieces or seen something on, but nothing in particular that pops out to me that I heard very directly.
Yes, sir. So if I were to ask you at this time, what key points do you remember about the Zimmerman case? Have you notated them on your note here? On your
Just
question?
about, yeah. I mean,
okay. Anything else that comes to mind? Anything that if I were to ask you, tell me about Zimmerman, the case involving Zimmerman and the death of Trayvon Martin, what would you say?
I couldn't tell you much about it other than Mr. Zimmerman is obviously the defendant in that situation, and unfortunately Trayvon Martin is not with us anymore.
Okay, all right. Did you listen to, in passing or just specifically where you were watching TV, not working, do you recall anything else kind of collateral to the case, anything else related to the case that wasn't necessarily in the courtroom or evidence? Do you remember anything about that at all?
I know that there was a lot of stuff going on in Sanford at the time, and a lot of very prominent people showed up. Mr. Al Sharpton and some of those people held rallies and things. Obviously, I heard about that living in the area.
What were your impressions about that? Did you think that was a good thing, a bad thing, or no opinion whatsoever, or just they had the right to free speech? And did you come one way or the other on that?
I would go more with, you know, they're allowed to do whatever they want, and, you know, they obviously felt strongly about what had happened, and they have the right in the United States of America to express that and to do a rally and have their say in it.
And what we're both sides, that is on behalf of the state and defense, are trying to prod you in terms of whether, and I know you stated your ultimate question is you did not come, you don't have an opinion in terms of the guilt or innocence of Mr. Zimmerman. Is that correct?
Correct.
So you can be a fair juror and listen to the evidence and the law and use your common sense in evaluating that.
Absolutely, to the best of my ability.
So my question is, when you heard about the rallies, or I think you mentioned somebody coming from out of town, Mr. Sharpton, et cetera, were your first impressions one of he's exercising the right to free speech, or he and other people out there, or necessarily in favor of Mr. Zimmerman or in favor of Mr. Martin? Were you swayed one way or the other because of that?
From what I know about the rallies and what I've heard, that they were more in favor of Mr. Martin.
Okay. Did that sway you in any way, in other words?
Not particularly, no.
Okay. Did you resent that there was somebody coming from out of town here to this community, and people got together, in other words, did that bias you against Mr. Martin's in terms of his death, or us prosecuting the person, Mr. Zimmerman?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. I know you work, what, you say 50 hours a week?
I do.
Have you had time since that first started, in terms of when February of last year, until recently, to follow the case other than in passing?
No, I haven't looked it up at all, no.
Okay. My question is, sometimes people get on the internet, and they start pulling up George Zimmerman or Trayvon Martin to see what's going on. Have you done any of that?
I'm sure that at some point in between February and now I may have, not that I remember particularly, but I'm sure that I have, because it was talked about a lot, and I heard about it, so I'm sure I looked up minor particulars here and there, but nothing too crazy.
In doing that, were you focusing on just one, or were you trying to, I don't want to say educate, but become informed about what was happening?
It'd be informed. I never try and look at one side of something. I always try and look at, if I'm looking at something, I want to find out what everybody has to say about it, not what one particular person has to say.
So were you trying to become informed just so you'll have a better understanding of what the case was about?
Mostly to find out what was, the rallies and stuff kind of, they shut areas of the city down, so, I live around here, and it impacted my life, so I was like, what's going on? Why can't I go that way?
Right, okay. How about once you got the summons, did your curiosity, your antennas go up again and say, ooh, I might be involved in this case at all?
Not in this case, but my family had mentioned a couple of things about it, absolutely, because they pay more attention to it, and they were like, you have jury duty on the 10th.
Okay, so they told you that it may involve the case involving George Zimmerman?
Yeah.
Okay. In doing that, did they give you, as most parents do, give you words of wisdom?
No.
Or and I'm not saying that they did, I'm just saying my question is, did they give you their insight about the case, like, oh, well, you need to know ABC about George Zimmerman, or you need to know ABC about Trayvon Martin, or about the case, anything
No,
like
none of that. My parents are of the same mindset. They were like, that could be that case, but, we're not going to say anything, because just in case it does happen, you shouldn't have any opinion about it as far as what we're concerned.
Sure. I know you've abided by the court's admonitions in terms of not doing any research. When you got the summons back 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, did you, not knowing what case it was going to be, did you do any follow-up research just in case you, because some jurors sometimes think, oh, I got to be more informed, I got to get more information so I can let people know.
No, I did not.
Okay.
Again, I work 50 hours a week. I didn't.
Okay, all right. And we realize that people, when they're asked to serve as jurors, it's not, a lot of people don't get overly excited about it, but we realize that most people understand it as their civic duty as part of living in this great country. But we realize that that causes a hardship in the sense of having to spend time away from family and friends, and also work. We realize, but that's the only way our system works, in order for people to do that.
Absolutely.
And my question to you is, sir, the court has made a determination. We have, first of all, as best we can, once we get a jury, estimated that it will take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks potentially.
Okay.
And it's that range, at least 2 weeks, maybe up to 4 weeks. And also, the court has made a decision, because of the exposure to the media, making sure that the jurors are not exposed to the media, that the jury will be sequestered, which is, you're very limited in terms of your contact with the outside world.
Right.
And realize that most people, they say, that wouldn't be a thing that they would vote for automatically. But the question is, would that present an insurmountable hardship to you? Is there something that just you couldn't do because of that?
Insurmountable, no, but it would be a major hassle to my life, yes.
Okay. And we realize it's a major hassle to most people's life. The question is, and I'm not trying to sway you one way or the other, but The question is, you have to tell us, and I mean, we realize it's a hassle, it's a disruption, as it is for everybody involved in the case, from the court to all sides. The question is it such a hassle that you're not going to be able to pay attention, and it would just completely interfere with you being able to sit as a juror, and you're going to present it, and you're going to take it out on the state, or you're going to take it out on defense, or you're going to take it out on who knows?
I would do my best not to, but I actually just got promoted at work literally the day before my summons came in, and as an assistant manager where I work, it would be a major hassle to my job because we've had a lot of trouble making sure that my shifts are covered this week.
Yes, sir. Now, by law, the judge, they can't, your employer cannot retaliate against you by law. But I don't want to mention in terms of where you work because I have it written down there, but we're trying to keep that from the public domain right now. I guess what I'm asking you, and only you would know, is having now broached the subject, do you think it would be such a hardship that you just cannot serve, and you just can't do it?
No, it would not be.
Okay. I may have a moment, Your Honor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. West.
I'm sorry. You're of the opinion that the media, either intentionally or unintentionally, sometimes has a bias to the way they
Right.
Okay.
They hear things, they talk about it, and then the next day they might hear something different, and that's what they're going to talk about that day.
And you would agree that the media, besides just giving hard facts or news, they sometimes interject their opinion.
Absolutely.
In both either the newscaster or sometimes they have people comment on live as best I can and as best as you can recall. What do you remember about the case?
From what I remember, I know that it happened in Sanford, and I couldn't remember what month. I know it happened last year, but from what I've heard, that Mr. Zimmerman was involved in a situation with a young black male, and then the self-defense is what I've heard, but the boy ended up being killed, and that was it.
I guess.
Everybody has something to say about everything.
Sure. Okay. Is that true not just of this topic, but of anything?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And you stated that, but you don't have much time for the news because I'm not really clear on the particulars. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I work 50 hours a week, and I have 2 dogs in my house that I take care of, and my parents aren't always well, so I take care of them as well. So I don't have a lot of time to pay attention, so I don't.
Okay. All right. Let's, if I could, let me prod your memory. Okay. And you mentioned self-defense. I gather, is that language that was used by other people in commenting about the case?
Yeah.
Or did you automatically come to that conclusion when you evaluated? You haven't evaluated the evidence.
Not really, no. I haven't looked at much of the evidence, and personally I try and withhold my judgment on almost any case, even when it's covered in the news, because the news has always got something to spin on it. So I like to wait until I can hear things from a more neutral perspective.
So
My house, I usually watch 13 because that's about it.
Okay. You also noted in your questionnaire that you've been informed, have mostly been informed of the cases of supposed self-defense, informed by just the news or just by people commenting about it or friends or family?
Combination of all of that.
Okay.
The news has stated it, friends, family, people that come into my job and talk about it.
So everybody's expressing opinion.